Scream 6 as a movie absolutely broke me. As a long-term Scream fan, this was something I wasn't expecting to happen again with any of the new movies. After being royally disappointed with Scream 2022, I didn't approach this movie with any expectations. Despite me having some positives about the movie, I have my issues as well, and in today's video I'm going to be breaking all this down for you guys. To make this video simple, I have broken it off into categories so it's easy for you to navigate. This video will absolutely contain spoilers for Scream 6, so let that be a warning. Long story short, the franchise may be close to my heart, but after Scream 2022, I doubted any of these newer movies will be able to recapture my full attention like the original trilogy did. After all, that's where I fell in love with these movies. When Scream 6 was announced, and it was without Neve Campbell, I was even more skeptical that Radio Silence were going to mess this up. So I went to the cinema expecting to see a mediocre movie. I came away pleasantly surprised. The movie isn't without its flaws, but it absolutely stands as a great movie overall. The first point I want to talk about, which is a driving factor of this franchise, is Ghostface. Ghostface may be at his most ruthless, most brutal, and is most effectively scary on screen in this movie. There were some scenes that suspended my beliefs, like the disappearance from the store, for example, but overall this killer reached a whole new level in the movie. His kills were brutal, even if they were few, and I'll get to that later. His presence on screen was terrifying once again. The whole subway train scene was probably, in my opinion, one of the most intimidating moments in the entire franchise, and that is saying something. This Ghostface separated himself from previous entries straight away. The line, "Who gives a fuck about movies," was so perfectly executed that it absolutely resonated with me. This was a different Ghostface. It wasn't the same stab fanatics we'd seen before. He was different, and his mission was completely unclear at this point. It allowed me as a viewer to prepare for something new, despite this being the sixth entry in this long-running franchise. As the movie progresses, Ghostface is effective in his attacks for the most part, and when he shows up, there's a fresh feeling of terror, something I haven't felt in the franchise for a long time. The change in setting to New York absolutely helped the fear aspect increase with this movie. Ghostface being out in the open made it seem like nowhere was safe. It keeps the audience on their toes as it progresses into more busy environments like the subway station or the bodega store. The more I saw Ghostface on screen in this movie, the more I was absolutely convinced this could be the best outing we've seen from the character to date. Unmasked Ghostface is a completely different story, however, which brings me to my next part, the killers. Oh boy, does this perfected Ghostface, it's a huge brick wall. The concept of having these killers was great, I enjoyed the angle. I did an assessment on Scream 1996 last month, and I basically touched upon the way the movie allowed the audience to be fearful of the killers, even though they were unmasked. It's an impressive feat, and this movie, like so many before it, doesn't deliver on that at all. The issue is that I believe they absolutely could have. Dermot Mulroney is a terrific actor, and in my opinion, could absolutely sell a perfect Ghostface under the mask. I enjoyed the character before the reveal, and if he had been the deranged psychopath that Ghostface was portrayed in this movie, he could have been the best we've seen. When the final act hit, he barely did anything. He didn't attempt to kill either Carpenter's sister, and his entire presence as a killer was lacking. There was even a point in the movie where I was expecting a fourth killer to show up. I just wasn't convinced any of these three killers were under the mask during the bodega scene, for instance. The same can be said for his kids. Quinn and Ethan were so unconvincing as Ghostface that they made Charlie Walker seem as intimidating as Robert Englund's Freddy. All three didn't do it for me. It wasn't the notion that they were Richie's family, it was the execution of how they were presented on screen. Luckily I can somewhat overlook this, as Ghostface was incredible in the movie. I just wish they'd continued the fear through the final act. Despite the original movies delivering on their final acts pretty well, I honestly felt this one was somewhat lacking when it came to physical contact between the killers and the Carpenter sisters. The climax felt sloppy, and the danger aspect was completely lost on me. To me, it highlights why three killers may not specifically work on screen, as the inclusion of too many characters in a final act removes the intimacy of the scene. All of the killers beforehand have delivered a slight feeling of intimacy between the leading star and whoever was under the mask. The killer, or killers, is basically bearing their soul to the survivor, and so it gives off a feeling of danger, yet it almost is like the killers share their most sinister inner thoughts or feelings. It gives the audience a larger insight into the characters and what motivates them. This movie seemed to lack that, and I personally knew as little about them as I did when they removed their masks. So if the killers are somewhat mediocre, is the plot any good? Thankfully, I enjoyed the overall plot and felt the fast pacing really benefited the movie. We go from big scene to big scene fast, and we managed to develop the main characters and provide a truly threatening Ghostface in just 2 hours. So the basic plot revolves around Ghostface attempting to frame Sam Carpenter for the murders that he is committing. So everything is supposed to be somewhat relating to that. If you think too hard, this doesn't make sense. Annika's death and most of the attacks committed by Ghostface were surrounded by several witnesses who absolutely could vouch for Sam. Quinn also, if their intention was to keep her dead. It's somewhat unclear if the plan isn't exactly thought through at times, or whether this is just Radio Silence who wanted to up the ante on the death scenes. The plot is fine, but if you think too hard about it, you will sit scratching your head. But we have great characters, something Scream 2022 didn't have. I found the core 4 bland and somewhat uninteresting in that movie. That is the complete opposite in this movie, however. They focus heavily on developing the relationships of Sam, Tara, Chad and Mindy in this movie, and it pays off. I went from knowing little about these people to some of them being possibly my favourites in the entire franchise. The difference between this movie and all the rest is that it reminds me of the original in tone. The first movie was somewhat intimate. It allowed us to go through a journey with Sidney. We met people through Sidney's eyes, we experienced everything as it progressed from Sidney's perspective. This movie builds on that. The core 4 are the heart of the movie and we go on a journey with them. Their relationships change, they make bad decisions. They learn to trust and untrust people in their friends group. It's one of the major components that make the movie stand out from the rest, in my opinion. The true star of the movie, however, is actually Melissa Barrera's Sam Carpenter. The character received mild development in Scream 2022, but the hints of darkness inside her were there. This movie gives 100% on that notion, makes her somewhat relatable and drives home a similar topic that the original movies touched upon, a topic that lies in the discussion of parenthood. Are we truly like our parents? This was something that drove the overall character arc for Sidney Prescott in the original trilogy. Sam faces a similar situation, only hers is far more serious. She's fighting this inner darkness, and Barrera transitions her shift in temptation perfectly on screen. By the climax of the movie, we discover that she's seemingly ready to embrace her darkness despite the danger it possesses, as she tiptoes towards it in order to survive. Whether or not this will be a continuing feat for her going forward is yet to be seen. Let's not forget the legacy characters. The return of Kirby Reed was well anticipated by fans, and in my opinion, her return didn't disappoint. She was used as much as she possibly could be alongside the core 4. We learn a lot about Kirby as a character from just her pieces of dialogue she has with different characters. The writing for her was so subtle, it allows elements of her feelings towards situations to be presented on screen without it taking out too much screen time. An example of this is when she's explaining the Ghostface mask to Detective Bailey. Her reaction at the mention of Jill Roberts and Charlie Walker's name was so subtle, yet it told us she absolutely still holds a grudge for the past. This hits home to Kirby, and it's a subtle line of dialogue that just wasn't present in Scream 2022. The return of Gale Weathers to the franchise in this movie seems somewhat lackluster in my opinion, despite the character providing some significance to the plot in terms of what she brings to the table for the core 4. She felt somewhat disconnected from the rest of the characters, despite the moment she shared with Sam and Tara during her attack towards the mid-act of the movie. What's upsetting about this is that Gale could absolutely have been used here. She was someone who had resided in New York long before Sam and Tara had. This was her playing field, and in a way, I honestly felt the lack of Sidney could have provided us with some large amount of Gale screen time. Going back to the intimacy of the movie, however, I believe very similar to my discussion about this being similar to Scream 1996, we only see Gale during her one-to-one scenes with Sam and Tara, until she is eventually attacked by Ghostface. This is extremely similar to Gale's pattern in the original movie. We saw her through Sidney's eyes, but the movie was able to utilise her in a way that allowed the character to have her own story arc alongside Sidney in the movie. Despite all this, Gale's chase scene in her apartment suite was one of the best moments from the movie in my opinion. I do however believe, in a truly unpopular form, the character should have been killed. Which brings me to my next point, plot armour. Having plot armour in a slasher movie is possibly one of the worst directions to go in my opinion. So many people are attacked in this movie with very little repercussions for it. One of the things I commended Blumhouse's Halloween trilogy for was their decision to sideline Laurie Strode in Halloween Kills due to the fact that she'd received a large, hefty stab wound in the 2018 movie. It was realistic, and the audience understood why she had to take a back seat. In this movie, so many characters should have been killed at various points, not because the characters deserve it, but because the writing allows us to witness these extremely brutal scenes that showcase Ghostface being completely badass and ruthless, only to take that away by allowing the survivors to limp out of Dodge as though they'd barely been touched. Chad may have been a highlight of the movie, but the way Ethan and Quinn stabbed him should have absolutely have resulted in his death. There's no way you can convince me he survived that horrendous stabbing and was left to bleed out for, let's say, 45 minutes afterwards. Gale's scene was another. She received a large amount of damage in her attack, despite the absolute shock of her being in that situation. I truly feel her dying after receiving a phone call from Ghostface would have been a tragic, yet emotional death scene for the movie. Because so many people survived their outings with Ghostface, the stakes in the movies don't seem that high, which is an issue when you're creating a Scream movie. Despite backlash from fans, people enjoy seeing characters they care about die on screen. It creates an emotional attachment that we as humans enjoy clinging to when we're watching movies. The build-up of Chad and Tara's relationship throughout, and despite me not specifically wanting him to die, if they intended on taking him down the way they did, he should have died. Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson knew how to take risks when it came to characters. Some of these directions still hold up today. Adding this amount of plot armour to the characters takes away the severity of the outings with Ghostface in my opinion. If they want to convince us these Ghostfaces are ruthless as they appear, the stakes need to be higher, the damage and conflict they experience needs to resonate hard. I felt this was one of the biggest flaws in the movie personally. Overall, I'd say this was an incredible outing for Scream. The movie breathes fresh life into the franchise in comparison to Scream 2022, and I believe Paramount should just let Radio Silence do what they want to do with the franchise at this point. This movie was filled with great moments and genuinely made me scared of Ghostface again, something I wasn't sure a modern horror movie would be able to do. I respect it for attempting to bring something different to the table and showing us that movies can exist outside of existing in the same tired out format of being set in Woodsboro and having movies relying on Sidney Prescott for its draw. I hope you enjoyed this video. I plan on assessing all of the movies in the franchise to give an overall detailed analysis of each movie's strengths and weaknesses. So far I've done this one and Scream 1996. There's more to discuss with this movie, so look for my future content. Thank you so much for watching guys, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.